Wait, what if the man who fell in love with his captive never actually let her go? That's the question haunting Young and the Restless fans right now, and honestly, it should be haunting yours too. Because on the surface, everything looks like it's finally settling down in Genoa City. Diane Jenkins is home, Jack Abbott is recovering, Patty Williams is behind bars. Case closed, right? Except it isn't. Not even close. There's a man out there who spent weeks alone with Diane Jenkins, who fell hard for her, who may still believe she loves him back, and nobody knows where he is. Stick around because we're about to break down why this so-called happy ending might just be the calm before an even darker storm. Hey everyone, welcome back to Soap Pulse. I'm Anderson, and if you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because we live for exactly this kind of soap mystery. All right, let's get into it. So here's where things stand for the Abbott family right now, at least on the surface. Diane Jenkins is finally putting the pieces of her life back together after surviving what can only be described as a nightmare. She was kidnapped by Patty Williams, a woman with a well-documented history of obsession and violence when it comes to Jack Abbott, and then handed off essentially into the care of a man calling himself Dr. Markham. Kyle Abbott, Diane's son, is thrilled his mother is home safe. Jack and Diane have reconciled, and Jack himself is expected to be released from the hospital soon after surviving 2 separate attempts on his life at Patty's hands. On paper, that reads like a resolution, a family that clawed its way back from tragedy. But according to longtime viewers piecing together the details of this storyline, the resolution might be an illusion, and the real danger may not have left town at all. Let's back up for a second though, because if you're just tuning into this story, you need to understand exactly who these people are and why this particular twist has fans so unsettled. Diane Jenkins is one of the most controversial figures in Genoa City history, a woman with a complicated, sometimes villainous past who has spent years trying to prove she's changed, trying to earn back trust, trying to hold on to Jack Abbott, the love of her life. Jack, for his part, is patriarch material, steady, moral, a man who keeps getting caught in the crossfire of chaos he didn't create. And then there's Patty Williams. If you know soaps, you know Patty. She is chaos. She's a woman whose obsession with Jack has driven her to lie, manipulate, and now, allegedly, to nearly kill. So when Patty orchestrated Diane's kidnapping, it wasn't just a random act of violence, it was personal, calculated, and rooted in years of psychological unraveling. Now here's where it gets genuinely strange, and where a second, much creepier character enters the picture: Dr. Markham. According to details that came out following the Beyond the Gates crossover, viewers learned that Diane wasn't simply being hidden away somewhere by Patty. She was being kept, quite literally, in the private home of a man identified as Dr. Markham, a psychiatrist Patty reportedly paid to keep Diane contained and controlled. On the surface, that already sounds disturbing enough, but what unfolded next is where the story shifts from a straightforward kidnapping plot into something far more psychologically tangled. While she was being held in his home, Diane didn't simply wait around to be rescued. According to how the story has played out, she made a calculated decision. She was going to manipulate Dr. Markham. She played the model patient, compliant, agreeable, emotionally available, anything to lower his guard and find her opening to escape. And in doing that, she apparently crossed into some deeply uncomfortable territory. At one point, Diane reportedly asked Markham directly whether there was a clinical term for when a patient develops feelings for their therapist. Think about that exchange for a second. That is not an innocent question. That's a woman testing the waters, probing to see just how deep this man's feelings might run and whether she could use them as a tool. And Markham's answer? He told her it was a natural part of the therapeutic process, not just natural, potentially even a positive part of it. Now, let's be honest here. Any actual licensed, ethical mental health professional would tell you that crossing that line is a massive red flag, not a therapeutic milestone. So right away, viewers picking apart this storyline have questions about who exactly this man really is. Is Dr. Markham even legitimate? Is this really the same psychiatrist who once treated Patty Williams? Or is there something else going on entirely? That question becomes even more important once you factor in what happened next. According to how the story unfolded, Markham didn't just entertain the idea of Diane's affection. He apparently developed real, genuine feelings for her. And here's the imbalance that makes this whole situation so unsettling. Diane was playing a role. Every warm glance, every vulnerable moment, every hint of affection was, according to the story, a calculated escape strategy. But Markham's feelings, those appear to have been completely real. He wasn't performing, he was falling, and that emotional shift seems to have actually changed the entire trajectory of the plot. At one point, Markham reportedly called Patty to tell her that things had changed, that they needed to adjust their plan. Sit with that for a second. A man who was supposedly just doing a job, holding a woman captive for payment, was now having second thoughts, not because it was the moral thing to do, but because he didn't want to lose her. That's not the behavior of someone executing a business arrangement. That's the behavior of someone who has convinced himself he's in a relationship. And that's exactly where the psychological horror of this story deepens. Because what did Patty's endgame actually look like? Based on what's publicly known about the story so far, Patty had been telling Jack that Diane was safely tucked away in a mental health facility, indefinitely receiving treatment. Except that was a lie. She was never in a facility at all. So if Markham hadn't started developing feelings, if he'd simply followed through on whatever Patty's actual plan was, there's a real possibility Diane may never have been meant to come home at all. Whether Patty intended something even more permanent for Diane remains something the show hasn't fully confirmed, but the implication hanging over this storyline is chilling enough on its own. But here's the layer that fans keep circling back to, the detail that turns this from just creepy captor territory into something with real lingering danger. If Diane hadn't managed her escape, there's a strong likelihood Markham would have simply kept her, not necessarily out of cruelty, out of obsession, out of a fantasy he'd built in his head about the two of them, and that's what makes what happened next so important to understand. Diane, ever resourceful, tricked Markham into giving her sedatives, framing it as something to help her sleep. She then used those very sedatives against him, drugging him until he passed out. From there, she and Kyle made their escape from the house, and from Markham's dogs, which had apparently been part of what kept her contained there in the first place. It's a genuinely gripping sequence when you think about it. A woman playing a long, dangerous game of psychological chess, using the very affection she manufactured as her way out. Except escaping his house doesn't necessarily mean escaping him, and that's the thread this entire investigation is built around. Because think about what Diane left behind when she fled that house. She didn't just leave a locked-up victim. She left behind a man who, by all accounts, fell head over heels for her. A man who may have built an entire fantasy in his mind about a real future together. And if you think that sounds familiar, it's because it mirrors something we already saw play out with Patty herself. Remember, Patty had spent years convincing herself that she and Jack were destined to remarry, that they'd live out some fantasy version of happily ever after, a fantasy that had absolutely no basis in reality, but one she clung to with terrifying conviction. If Markham is now walking around with a similar delusion about Diane, genuinely believing her affection was real, genuinely believing they could still have a future together, then Genoa City may be dealing with a second version of exactly the same problem that just nearly got Jack killed. And that raises an uncomfortable question that fans have been asking nonstop. Who is Dr. Markham really? Is he simply a disgraced, morally compromised psychiatrist who let his professional boundaries collapse because Patty was paying him well? Or is there something even stranger going on? Some longtime viewers have raised the possibility, and to be clear, this is speculation, not confirmed information, that the man calling himself Dr. Markham might not be who he claims to be at all. That perhaps the real psychiatrist who once treated Patty is either deceased or being held somewhere himself, and that the man who held Diane captive was simply using his identity. It's an unconfirmed theory, but it's the kind of theory that soap storytelling loves to plant seeds for, and it would certainly explain why this character behaves less like a licensed professional and more like someone improvising his way through a fantasy he's desperate to hold on to. Now, let's talk about what happened the moment Diane and Kyle got home, because this is where the story takes an entirely different and frankly enraging turn. They arrived back at the house to find Jack stabbed and bleeding out, a horrifying scene by any measure. And in the chaos that followed, Patty, who had orchestrated this entire nightmare from the start, reportedly claimed that Diane was the one who attacked them both. Let that sink in for a moment. The woman who kidnapped Diane, who paid a man to hold her captive, who has a documented history of violent obsession toward Jack, tried to pin an attack on the very victim she'd taken. And here's where fans have every right to be furious. According to how this played out, law enforcement arrested Diane without reportedly interviewing Kyle, without verifying an alibi, seemingly acting almost entirely on Patty's word alone. District Attorney Christine Williams spoke publicly about there being evidence against Diane, but based on what's been shown, that evidence appears to consist of exactly one thing: Patty's statement. That's it. No physical evidence tied Diane to the crime. There were reportedly no fingerprints on the knife because Patty had worn gloves. If investigators had simply taken the basic step of asking Kyle what he witnessed, he would have confirmed that he and Diane walked through that door together mere moments before finding Jack. It's a detail that, frankly, should have unraveled Patty's story instantly. Instead, the investigation moved forward on the word of a woman with a documented history of violence and manipulation, while the actual victim in this scenario was treated as a suspect. It's sloppy, it's frustrating, and it's exactly the kind of investigative gap that leaves the door open for even more chaos down the line. Because if the people meant to protect this family can miss something that obvious, what else might they be missing about Markham? Which brings us to the heart of why this story isn't over, not by a long shot. With Patty now locked up and denied bail, you'd think Diane and Jack could finally exhale, and in some ways they are trying to. But there's one enormous unresolved variable still hanging over Genoa City. Dr. Markham is missing. Nobody has confirmed his location. Nobody has confirmed his arrest. And based on how obsessed this man apparently became with Diane during her captivity, that absence isn't reassuring. It's terrifying. And according to how this storyline has been discussed among fans, Diane herself seems to sense it. She's reportedly voiced her fears to both Kyle and Jack, expressing genuine worry about what happens now that Markham is unaccounted for. But here's the frustrating part. The men in her life don't seem to be taking the threat as seriously as she is. Kyle and Jack apparently believe Markham is long gone, that it would be foolish for him to stick around Genoa City with law enforcement circling and Patty's crimes coming to light. Their reasoning makes a certain surface-level sense. Why would a man wanted for his involvement in a kidnapping plot linger in the one town where he's most likely to get caught? But here's the counterpoint, and it's one worth sitting with. Obsession doesn't operate on logic. If Markham genuinely believes he and Diane share something real, if he's convinced himself that her affection during captivity was authentic rather than a survival strategy, then self-preservation may not be his priority. Love, or in this case delusion masquerading as love, has a track record on this show of overriding common sense entirely. We just watched Patty prove that exact point for weeks. So is Markham really gone? Here's something worth noting for anyone tracking this story closely. As of now, there's been no clear public confirmation that the actor portraying Markham has wrapped his run on the show, and if that's the case, then his story likely isn't finished. Because think about it from a pure storytelling perspective, it would be an incredibly anticlimactic exit for a character this unsettling to simply vanish from town without so much as a confrontation, a reveal, or a consequence. Soap storytelling rarely lets a character this obsessive fade quietly into the background. Usually, that kind of unresolved tension is exactly the setup for one final dramatic reappearance. And that brings us to something fans have been vocal about across message boards and social media: outright exhaustion with how many kidnapping storylines this show has run through in such a short span of time. Let's actually count them because the sheer volume is almost staggering. This year alone, viewers watched Mariah take Dominic. They watched Victor orchestrate a fake kidnapping involving Lily and the twins. Patty kidnapped Jack, then Patty kidnapped Diane. And before all of that, there was an entire storyline involving Matt Clark abducting multiple people in Vegas. That is an extraordinary number of kidnapping plots to run through in a single stretch of storytelling, and plenty of longtime viewers are openly saying the well is running dry. Nobody wants to watch history repeat itself with yet another captivity storyline, especially not one involving Diane again, especially not so soon after what she just survived. And yet, when you line up the pieces currently on the table, it's hard not to feel like the show might be building toward exactly that. Here's why. With CBS Daytime reportedly still working through the process of hiring a new head writer, current reporting suggests the network is aiming to have someone new in place by the start of season 54 this October. That means, as of right now, in the middle of July, there is still a significant stretch of storytelling ahead under the current creative direction. Plenty of runway for one more twist involving Markham before any new writer takes the reins. And given how many loose threads are still dangling around this character, his real identity, his whereabouts, his emotional fixation on Diane, it would be surprising if the show simply let all of that dissolve without payoff. So let's talk about what a potential next move might actually look like based purely on the pieces currently in play. We know Kyle is reportedly in the process of negotiating with Patty this week, trying to convince her to turn on Victor and shift blame onto him for what she's done. If that negotiation escalates, there's a real possibility Patty could end up throwing Markham under the bus too in an effort to save herself. And if a manhunt for Markham intensifies as a result, that kind of pressure could easily push a man already spiraling into obsession toward something desperate. If he senses the walls closing in, if he realizes leaving town quietly is no longer an option, the most dangerous version of this story is the one where he decides to make one final move, grabbing Diane before disappearing from Genoa City for good. And look, there's a darkly ironic layer to all of this too. Diane's escape plan worked because she made this man believe she cared about him. She played the long game brilliantly to get herself out of that house, but in doing so, she may have inadvertently created the exact emotional obsession that now threatens to follow her home. It's a reminder of just how complicated and dangerous these kinds of manipulation tactics can become, effective in the moment, but capable of leaving consequences that linger far longer than anyone anticipated. And here's the thing, Diane may not have the full support system around her that she actually needs right now. Kyle, for his part, seems increasingly focused on a completely different battle, taking down Victor and pursuing his own version of justice or revenge. That's pulling his attention in another direction entirely, away from the threat his mother is genuinely worried about. Meanwhile, Jack remains in the hospital with no clear timeline on his release, and even once he is discharged, he's likely facing weeks of limited mobility, possibly bedridden, possibly confined to the couch as he recovers from a stabbing that nearly took his life. Which means the two men who would normally be Diane's first line of protection are, for very understandable reasons, distracted and diminished right now. That leaves Diane in a genuinely vulnerable position. Think about her actual day-to-day movements. She could be caught alone at the house. She could be alone on her way to visit Jack in the hospital. She could be walking into Jabot for work, going about a completely normal routine when a man who has been off the grid and spiraling with obsession finally reappears. There is, at least, some reason for cautious optimism, with Tracy and Kyle reportedly moving back into the mansion and Ashley also said to be in town. Diane likely won't be spending long stretches of time completely by herself. But realistically, it only takes one unguarded moment for someone determined enough to act, and that's really the unsettling truth sitting underneath this entire storyline. Genoa City has, quite literally, earned a reputation among fans as something like the kidnapping capital of the soap opera world. And if Markham truly is still out there, still fixated, still convinced that what happened between them meant something real, then the possibility of Diane being taken again isn't some wild leap of imagination. It's a logical continuation of everything we've already seen unfold. So where does that leave us? Diane is home, but not necessarily safe. Jack is alive, but not yet strong enough to protect anyone, including himself. Patty is behind bars, but the man she hired may be far more dangerous precisely because his motivations are no longer transactional, they're personal. And the writing team currently steering this show has months left before any new creative direction takes over, which means there's ample time for one more gut punch twist before the credits roll on this chapter. Maybe Markham quietly disappears and never resurfaces, and this entire theory ends up being nothing more than fan speculation that never pays off. Or maybe, just maybe, Genoa City is about to prove once again that obsession doesn't leave quietly, that the men and women who fall this hard rarely just walk away. Either way, one thing is clear. The story of Diane Jenkins is far from over, and whether the next chapter brings peace or another nightmare may depend entirely on a man nobody can currently find. If you've been following this storyline as closely as we have, let us know down in the comments what you think is really going on with Markham and whether you believe Genoa City is really done with kidnappings for the year. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update the moment new details drop, and we'll see you in the next one.